the YouTube channel of the Department of General Linguistics, Palacký University in Olomouc, Czech Republic. Today we are interviewing a special guest, Pauline Delahaye from the Sorbonne University, and currently working at the Department of Semiotics of the University of Tartu in Estonia as a postdoc. Pauline is one of the main proponents of the field of zoosemiotics. So we are having some interesting questions for her. And so to start, Pauline, I would like to ask you, in your opinion, what are the limits of biotranslation between non-linguistic animals and humans?
I think they are the same that we have in any translation. We are losing information in translation. It's something that all the linguists know by now. In English, between saying I love you and I'm loving you, there is a huge difference. But for example, I don't know chess, for example, but in French, it's impossible to translate this difference without making a very big and stamped sentence, and you are quite losing even in this way. Obviously, when you are from very different culture, you are losing even more. And obviously, when you are from very different species of mind, you are losing even more information. And I'm quite a fan of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and between the language and the mind, which one is shaping the other, it's always complicated. But obviously, you are a different mind. They are a very different mind. So the translation can exist at some point, but it's very limited as any translation. And we have to understand that an honest and complete translation is not something possible. We struggle a lot to do honest translation between our own languages. And obviously, we have to be very aware of this. There is things to learn in this way, but obviously the limits are important. And the more we are working with very different species, the ape, the mammalians, and so on and so on and so on, I would say the thinner the kind of information we can have will be, obviously. And we have to be aware of this. It's not a bad thing. We just have to know that it will be this way and work knowing this.
Yeah, I agree. Translation is a very complex term. Even in the inter-linguistic translation, we have difficulties to define it. So biotranslation, even more complicated. And what would you say about the philosophical concerns about animals? Do you think that they are simply ignored by most people, or what is your position on this, as you have a lot of experience in the field? What is, like, how would you describe?
I think there is two important things. First, usually people have ethical concern when it's a species that is like us. But we have to understand that, and even more in our Anthropocene period, that every kind of species is precious for biodiversity, for science, on a simply ethical way, even if they are very different, even if it's a kind of life form we are not even sure to clearly understand. And usually ethical concern is really narrow-minded and really focused on the species like us. And well, it's normal on the same way that I am very concerned about ethical matter when it's about my family. And obviously, I am less concerned when it's people really, really far away I never met. And it's the same kind of distance that appear in other species. But we have to be aware that this exists, and this is a bias, really, that we have to, I will say, to address when we want to do something on the scientific part. And the second thing is that it is very possible that there is ethical concern that we don't know and we can't even imagine, because we are dealing with very, very different minds. As I work in emotion, a quite frequent question is, do you think other species are emotion that we don't have? I say, probably, maybe, but how can we find them? When we are looking for a different way of seeing, we know that we have a kind of cells that are a receptor for light, and we are looking for them. But what are we looking for, biologically speaking, to know that there is another emotion there, something that we can't even imagine? So there is probably a lot of ethical concern we can't understand because we are not shaped the same way. Probably there are different feelings or different issues, different things in this kind of life form we can't even imagine. So being, I will say, precautious with different life forms is an important thing, because we don't really know how it's interpreted from them, obviously.
Yes, that's very hard to define somehow interspecies understanding of emotions. And I'm sure there is quite a lot of literature on the topic. But remaining in this topic of the moral concerns or consequences, when we go to the field of biosemiotics, because this channel is mostly focused on biosemiotics, the thing that in particular your biosemiotic work, if you can like describe yourself as a biosemiotician, can it have impact on policy regarding the status of animals in society?
Yeah, I think that a nice aspect in zoosemiotics is that we have a lot of matter to address that can have a quite a concrete impact quite quickly, and obviously it's good for motivation. A good example is that in France, it was we were not alone, obviously, but it was a part of the semiotician that introduced the word sentient or sentience in the French dictionary. And obviously, at the moment the word exists, it became something that we can talk about, something we can question about. And this word was really used, for example, in all the debates about using wild animal in circus. And now we have some of the sometimes very old families with a big tradition of circus that said they won't use wild animals, and sometimes no animals at all in the future. And we see that explaining concept, putting word on it, working on lexicology is something that changing the mind. And when you are changing the mind of the people, you are changing the behaviors. And sometimes we are changing society for the better, I hope.
You mentioned already 3 times or so the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Could you explain, because maybe not all.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like, what is the basic idea of this hypothesis?
In a very, I would say, summarized version, it's the hypothesis saying that depending of the language you are using, you are not seeing and perceiving the word on the same way. A very good, even if it's a bit exaggerated example, is that when you are from some tribes, some polar tribes like the Sam, for example, you have various words. I don't remember the number exactly, but you have various words to describe the word ice or the word snow. And having different terms you are able to better see this difference between the different kind of snow, between the different kind of ice. And it's important for these people because knowing the kind of ice that is currently on the river can be the difference between you being alive and you being frozen to death. So obviously it's a very important knowledge for them. And it's always difficult to say, is it the mind that shaped the language, or is it because you have the word to say something that you are able to imagine it? I remember when we were in Moscow for the gathering in Biosemiotics in Moscow, I give an example, and this example a bit shocked people, so I think it's a good one, about the word compersion. Compersion is I would say the opposite of jealousy, is the fact that you are happy to see your lover in love with someone else. But a lot of people can't even imagine having this emotion if you don't explain that this word exists. And then they start to think about it. And sometimes the emotion appears because there is a word to talking about it. But which is the way around? Obviously, if the word exists, it is because at some point someone had the necessity to create it, to talk about something he or she were feeling. So it's a very interesting hypothesis because it's not something when you know it's in this way and no other. It's more a way to analyze I would say, the game of influences you have between the mind, the environment, and the language.
So would you say that it is analogic to human language, that we can find similar behavior in animal communication, the relation between mind and like, let's say, language, even though, they have other means of communication, but is this what you mean by using the term of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis applied to non-human animal communication?
I'm not sure to understand completely the question. Can you do it again? Sorry.
Yeah, so whether your understanding of this hypothesis applied to animal studies is analogic to how we use it in human language, like as a relation between mind, as you described it, right?
I think you used the right word. It's analogic because it's not exactly the same, obviously. This hypothesis was created by studying humans, and obviously you have to make changes. But yeah, it's a good analogy to at least starting to understand how, for example, you can't really understand a behavior or a way of communication if you are not taking into account the environment in which the animal is evolving. And it's also why it's not I don't believe in lab works, but I think they won't even be as relevant as what we can observe in the wild, because you obviously, by changing the environment, you are changing the way the animal perceive the environment, its relationship between its body, its food, its environment, and you are changing what it is expressing also. So I'm not saying bad thing about lab works. We need them for some precise point that we couldn't study otherwise. But I think that always the reference point should be the observation in the wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from how you are describing your research, I would say that the zoosemiotics is a field that has implications like beyond academia, that it has a real impact on society. Am I correct in this?
Yeah. I'm thinking, for example, about a recent work of my very soon colleague in Tachu, Nelly Maikvi, and I'm sorry, Rin, I forgot your last name, sorry. But they were both working on the relationship with inhabitants in the case of the reintroduction of the mink. And reintroduction of species is always a perilous exercise, but it is necessary, and it is even more necessary in the biodiversity crisis that we are facing. And if this work and similar work can add this reintroduction to work better, obviously we have a quite strong impact on what these species can be, what the reintroduction can do for the species, how the human will live with that. And it's a big impact on society.
Yeah, this is a very important point to make, so that I'm happy that you mentioned it. And let me follow up with the next question. Do you think there is animal agency in construction of our social environments?
So my quick answer will be yes, I am sure, but I have still nothing to prove it. But the research project we are starting in Tartu will be, I would say, partially focused on this aspect, because we are living with this species, and I think it makes no sense to think that they can be there for so long and have no influence on the way we are constructing our environment, our culture, our social network. And we are here with some of these species, the rats and the crows, taking the next project. We are here talking about species that we know that they can be, for example, very creative in problem solving. So obviously there is agency from this animal, and they are with us for very, very long. I don't really see how this can't be, but I have nothing to prove it for the moment. So you are completely allowed to not believe me, because, well, without evidence, it's only an opinion.
Yes, let's say I believe you, but I will be waiting for your empirical research, and maybe in the next interview you will tell us more about this particular question. But to go a little bit more general, I would like to ask you a very general question for our followers who are not really from the field. If it's possible, from your perspective, to describe biosemiotics in general to someone who never get in contact with the word or with the discipline, how would you describe it in very simple words?
Semiotics in general is the study of sign. Sign are what carries the sense of anything. And we are studying the sign, and in biosemiotics, we are more specifically studying the signs in the context of different life forms, depending on the specialty of the scholar. What is interesting in this, in that historically speaking, semiotics was a branch of the medicine. It was the way when you know, it was ancient Greek and something tried to invent medicine, and you couldn't open someone to understand what was going wrong inside, because, well, you are going to kill him at this time. And you have to manage with the outside, with all the signs that are emitted. You have to deal with them and try to understand what is going on inside in this way that you can't see. And doing this in biosemiotics today is that different life forms are emitting a lot of signs. And by studying them, we can understand complex mechanisms that are inside this life form. In zoosemiotics, you try to understand what is going on in other species' minds. And obviously, you can't ask them because most of the time they won't answer. And you can't, yeah, even if you make an X-ray, you won't see these things. So we have to rely on the sign and to say, okay, here is the collection of symptoms, we will say. What is our diagnostic? Sometimes we are wrong, but it's the only way, for the moment at least, that we have.
Thank you. That was a beautiful introduction to semiotics and biosemiotics, in particular addressing students of medicine, maybe. Great. So to conclude our interview, I would like to describe your approach. Is your approach unique somehow, and what can it bring new to the discipline? What is your major contributions to the field of biosemiotics?
I don't know if it's okay. It's not very nice to say, but yeah, it's for me, so I can do it. It's maybe a quite naive perspective, because something I understand during my PhD thesis is, for whatever reason, I don't know why, the French scholar and the French academia didn't communicate very well with the rest of the academia on the semiotics subject in general. So I was in my doctorate years when I discovered all big part of this. And to be honest, I am quite very young in discovering the traditional scholar and traditional writers. And I know that sometimes you are saying, okay, here is the theory, and here is what we are doing with the theory. But I didn't work this way. I was trying to construct methodology and tools. And at some point, I encounter author and say, oh, that is really nice. Is this what I need for doing this or for doing this? And at some point, I say, okay, but he's saying that. But in my methodology and in the studies I bring on, it's not working well. And so maybe it helps you to be a bit more creative, because you don't have, I would say, the same scholar references, and diversity is good in science. Obviously, don't do like me for every one of your students, but having one of this kind in the team can be something useful. And it's also the reason why I think it's always very interesting to bring in your own country references from all around the world. And I am very, very happy to introduce what I discovered in other country in my own origin country. And I think they are quite happy with that too. So it's a win-win.
Perfect. And to conclude this very nice chat with you, Pauline, I would like to advertise our current special issue of the journal Linguistic Frontiers, for which you were a guest editor. So the topic was surprisingly zoosemiotics. And can you say just a few words about this special issue, about the papers, etc.?
So I will say that I am really happy to have this special issue, obviously because I like my field and I like to talk about my field and to gather people talking about my field, but also because zoosemiotics is a very young field, and it's from the biosemiotics field, which is not very old either. And I think it's a sign of good health in science. Specialized branches developing is the sign that we have found things, and these things are in fact too interesting and too specialized for just using the general discipline. We need special tools, we need special methodologies, and well, it's a fruitful field, and it's a good news to have a fruitful field.
Perfect. Thank you very much for being here today with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and good luck with your research. Good luck for the Zoosemiotics.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.